Welcome to this explainer. Okay, if you've scrolled through any AI-generated clips lately, you've almost certainly noticed this really specific, kind of hard-to-describe sensation. The visuals, they're stunning, often hyper-realistic. And yet, the overall experience feels strange, uncanny, and just completely disjointed. Today, we're going to set the stage for exploring this strange sensation and unpack exactly why watching an AI-generated movie feels less like watching a traditional film and honestly way more like experiencing someone else's hallucination.
Okay, let's dive into this, because this isn't just a simple breakdown of technical glitches or rendering errors. It's actually a genuine psychological mystery waiting to be solved. We aren't just looking at software limitations here. We're looking at how our brains process reality, how we understand narrative, and the very nature of storytelling itself. To really get why AI films feel like a total fever dream, we have to look right at the intersection of modern technology, classic film theory, and cognitive psychology.
Section 1. The AI Movie Boom.
To get to the bottom of this surreal feeling, we first need to look at the current landscape. Welcome to the 2026 reality of AI filmmaking. The technology has absolutely exploded, offering us these incredibly powerful, fast, and highly creative outputs. But, and this is a massive but, it is still pretty far from producing that fully autonomous, push-a-button-and-get-a-blockbuster cinema that a lot of folks predicted. Right now, what we casually call AI films generally fall into four main categories dominating the platforms today. First up, you have your short films. These are usually 30 seconds to maybe 5 minutes long, and they're manually assembled from text-to-video clips. Second, there are micro-series. These are episodic, 2 to 4 minute formats totally optimized for social media. A really great example is that viral micro-series Fruit Love Island. It gained millions of views on TikTok and was assembled incredibly fast using multiple different tools for the script, the video, and the voice. Third, we have AI-assisted films, where human directors lead the project but use AI for very specific scenes or visual effects. And finally, fully synthetic films. These are entirely generated by AI, script, voice, visuals, the whole shebang. Though, to be fair, these remain incredibly rare and mostly experimental right now.
Section 2. Where AI falls short.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how these specific constraints dictate the entire feel of an AI movie. Why are we mostly seeing short-form content instead of 2-hour cinematic epics? Well, that dreamlike quality is actually a direct byproduct of where the tech currently falls short. Most text-to-video models out there right now, like Runway or Sora, are only generating clips that are roughly 3 to 10 seconds long. And across those short little clips, maintaining character identity is notoriously difficult. On top of that, lighting and style tend to fluctuate wildly from shot to shot, and crucially, audio often has to be generated entirely separately. Achieving accurate lip sync and matching that emotional resonance is still a massive hurdle for creators.
Because of these strict 3 to 10 second limits, creators are forced to become incredibly heavy-handed editors. You literally can't just let a camera roll. To make a coherent video, you have to stitch dozens, sometimes hundreds, of these highly fragmented clips together manually just to form a narrative. And this constant, relentless stitching fundamentally alters the viewing experience. It creates a choppy, rapidly shifting visual rhythm that feels totally different from what we're used to.
Section 3. The Hollywood Illusion.
To truly grasp why the stitched-together AI footage feels so jarring to our brains, we actually need to shift our focus to classic film theory. You see, we've been trained for over a century on how a movie is supposed to look and feel, and that's largely thanks to something called the Hollywood illusion. Let's contrast classical Hollywood cinema with AI cinema for a second. The Hollywood model is built on an invisible style. It relies on linear cause and effect, deep psychological motivation, and goal-oriented active characters. Every single cut makes logical sense to advance the plot. AI cinema, by contrast, it's a style-first approach. It's visually coherent within a tiny 3-second window, but it's narratively thin overall. It relies on highly fragmented scenes that just don't naturally flow from one logical action to the next.
So the crucial point is this intense cognitive dissonance it creates in our minds. You're sitting there being presented with high-fidelity, hyper-realistic visuals, this bottom-up sensory overload that looks exactly like reality. But at the exact same time, you are completely missing the top-down psychological story flow. Your eyes are telling you, hey, this is real, but your brain is telling you the cause and effect logic is entirely broken.
Section 4. The Psychology of Dreams.
This brings us perfectly into the cognitive psychology behind how we process moving images, connecting the literal art of film editing directly to our internal mental states. When the logic of reality breaks down, where does our brain naturally go?
It goes straight to dreams. Psychology gives us a fascinating concept here called event segmentation. Think of it as the brain's very own cutting room floor. It's an automatic, ongoing process where our minds break down dynamic scenes into meaningful spatial and temporal units. We're constantly automatically identifying situational changes, like a shift in location or a new character walking in, just to understand our reality. When a traditional film cuts smoothly, it beautifully mimics how we naturally segment events in the real world.
Legendary film editor Walter Murch famously compared film cuts to the human blink, but he also pointed out something much deeper. He noted that the oniric, or dreamlike nature of films, is deeply familiar to us. When we dream, we accept massive discontinuities, right? We jump from one location to another instantly without questioning it. Murch's idea brilliantly ties the fragmented, jarring editing process of AI video directly to human psychology. When AI fails to mimic reality, it accidentally mimics our dreams.
We actually see this exact same effect in experimental, avant-garde cinema. Experimental editing breaks that invisible style of Hollywood. Studies show that when inexperienced viewers watch experimental films, they genuinely struggle to construct a cohesive, naturalistic narrative. They become hyper-aware of the edits. AI films currently force you to do the exact same thing. You have to actively fight to piece the narrative together because the conventional Hollywood grammar just isn't there to hold your hand.
Section 5. Accidental Christopher Nolans. Let's move to and see how this builds into the work of a modern auteur who deliberately uses these exact psychological quirks.
There's actually a place in mainstream cinema where we see this exact kind of reality-bending logic. What happens when a human deliberately uses these psychological quirks to tell a story? Enter Christopher Nolan. Honestly, we can kind of think of AI models right now as accidental Christopher Nolans. Nolan is an auteur filmmaker who intentionally creates the surreal, labyrinthine structures that AI currently produces by pure generative accident. Where AI gives us fragmented dreamscapes due to technical limits, Nolan is building the deliberate architecture of dreams.
Nolan once said, "I'm fascinated by our subjective perception of reality, that we are all stuck in a very singular point of view, a singular perspective on what we all agree to be an objective reality." His epistemological thrillers focus almost entirely on the distortion of memory, where objective truth is always just slightly out of reach. When you watch an AI film that's constantly morphing and changing details frame by frame, you are experiencing that exact same fluid, highly subjective reality.
And this brilliantly illustrates what we can call Nolan's surreal toolkit. He uses metafictional elements, temporal shifts, nonlinear storytelling, and lucid dream logic. He utilizes recursive narratives like the Drosty effect, where a picture appears within itself, and mathematically impossible objects like Penrose stairs. If you look closely in an AI-generated video, you'll see almost all of these elements happening spontaneously. The AI effortlessly creates visual paradoxes and temporal shifts, not because it's some genius director, but simply because it doesn't understand object permanence.
The main distinction here, of course, is deliberate versus accidental. In a film like Inception, Nolan deliberately crafts his impossible Penrose stairs and nonlinear plots to explore complex themes. AI, on the other hand, simply hallucinates them. It creates a disjointed reality entirely because of its 10-second technical limitations. The AI literally forgets what the staircase looked like in the previous shot, resulting in an impossible geometry that feels incredibly profound, even though, at the end of the day, it's just a technical blind spot.
So how is the tech industry trying to fix this accidental surrealism? Mainly by moving toward unified workflows. Tools like the Creepapole AI Director Agent are starting to act as true orchestrators. Instead of bouncing between a dozen different tools and generating isolated fragments, these platforms manage script generation, scene orchestration, voiceover alignment, and automated editing all within one unified pipeline. They're actively trying to bridge the gap, taking productions from disjointed fever dreams to cohesive narratives in a matter of minutes.
Which leaves us with this absolutely crucial question to end our explainer on. Will these unified workflows eventually allow AI to flawlessly master Hollywood's invisible style? Or is that completely missing the point? Perhaps the true potential of AI video isn't to perfectly mimic objective reality, but to be embraced as a fascinating, surreal, and uniquely dreamlike art form all its own. What do you think? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.